Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to have you join us today. We really appreciate your time wherever you are in the country and around the world. We're based here in the United States, and there could not be a more important panel discussion today, which is focused on activating for activism. And I'm thrilled to have such an exciting panel to talk through this very important and complicated issue. I'm your moderator, Simon Mainwaring. I'm the CEO and founder of a consultancy based in Los Angeles called We First that builds purpose-driven brands. And like all of us who are attending today, we're deeply passionate about how all of us can play a meaningful role in driving change. And there's perhaps no topic more important right now, more pressing and also more complicated, both in terms of the issues themselves, but also how do we solve for those issues? How do all of us, and by way of, by extension, our organizations, our companies, how do we show up in the most meaningful way? And obviously top of mind over the recent months has been the global pandemic, COVID-19. Then most recently, we've got the protests around racial injustice playing out here in the United States, across the country and all around the world. And let's not forget that at the same time, there are so many needs out there that are being addressed by nonprofits and activists, many of which have lost some of their funding or some of the attention they desperately deserve and need during the time of the pandemic as well. So we have these two top of mind, very pressing issues, but there's also all the other work that needs to go on at the same time. And so we're very lucky today to have a collection of 4 experts who really specialize in this field, activating for activism. We've got Paul Young from Facebook. We've got Zaniya, who comes from YesSheCanCampaign. We've got Khary, who comes from the Everytown Survivor Network, and Laurie from Ad Council. And what we're going to do is we're going to give each one of them an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about themselves, and address a couple of questions. But today is just as much about you. I'm sure there are so many questions you have at this critical time for the country, for our planet, for the world at large, and humanity as a family. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoom, if you scroll down the bottom with your mouse, you'll see a little panel pop up and you'll see the chat button there, the little speech bubble. And if you click on that, the chat box will pop up and you can write your questions in for anyone on the panel at any time during the next hour of discussion. And then I'll make sure that we bring that up either directly when you post it at the time, or we'll be spending the vast majority of the session answering your questions. So again, this is about you. Go down to that chat box, make sure you click it, get it open, and depending on what you hear or any pressing questions you already have in top of mind, pop them in there and we'll make sure that we get to them as well. So again, thank you for your time. I'm Simon and our first guest is Paul Young. And it's rare that you find 2 Australians in any one place. Wherever you go in the world, there's generally one Australian. You're like, where did that Aussie come from? So right now, somewhere in the world, someone's missing an Australian because Paul and I are both here, which is just odd.
My wife, Simon, actually is sure there's more than 25 million Australians because since she married one, she's American, we're everywhere. She thinks there's probably 200 million Australians scattered around, yeah.
We're scattered around like pixie dust, shall we say. And also I want to congratulate Paul on behalf of everyone because Paul is just coming off paternity leave. He's just had a child. The delivery was done during the pandemic and, he got half an hour with his newborn daughter and then had to step away. So you've had a curious time over the last few days.
Yeah, we yesterday at the Social Innovation Summit and today it's my first time talking to adults about not what's in a diaper. And my prep for this panel was holding my beautiful little girl Lennon and singing Bob Marley, which is actually a nice way to get the energy flowing. So, good way to start the day for everyone. I apologize if she cries. She's a very vocal young lady, which I'm impressed by. So we might hear her.
Wow, so you've had a very real sort of distraction going on as well. You've been throttling on several fronts right now. And just by way of explanation, Paul is nonprofit partnership lead for social impact at Facebook. And, Paul, I'd love you to talk a little bit about, your role there and so on, but just a specific question. Facebook has recently launched some new social impact features, which allow people and organizations to contribute, to mobilize themselves. Could you let people know what they are, how they work, and how then they can address issues as far ranging as, COVID, all the way through to, you know, social and racial injustice that we see right now.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thanks for the opportunity to share some of the new tools. So I work within the social impact team at Facebook, and we're a product team that's totally focused on how do we help have more positive social impact in the world. And in particular, my group is all about working with nonprofits like YesSheCanCampaigns and ISORG, and every org that's out there to help them do good and achieve their goals on the platform. So we want to help orgs raise money. We want to help them acquire new donors. We want to help them get their message out. So every day, what my team and I do is we meet with nonprofits, we hear from them, we understand how we can help them, and we try to build better tools to help them have more impact and to help people have impact for them. So it's pretty broad what that might mean. So it can mean organic content. So across Instagram and Facebook, like how can nonprofits share their message and get them out there? This might mean running a Facebook group that's connected with the issue they're focused on. It's their content strategy for their page. How do they create compelling video and share it with the world on Facebook? It can mean how they optimize Instagram. And I'd really recommend, you're going to hear a lot from Zaniya, but I'd really recommend checking out YesSheCanCampaign on Instagram. I think it's a near best practice. You're going to see great videos, story highlights, like a way to get to know their brand on a connected level. So you can really see a great example in YesSheCanCampaign of how to do Instagram really well as a nonprofit. I think when I talk with my nonprofit partners, though, the most important thing we can do for nonprofits is help them raise money. Yesterday, Pamela from Fidelity was sharing that 80% of nonprofits only have 3 months of cash in the bank before the coronavirus, before the lockdowns. So the nonprofit sector is at tremendous risk right now. We all need to help support them more. On Facebook, what this means is giving people tools where they can raise money, knowing that 100% of the money they raise will go directly to that nonprofit. So you've probably seen them out there, whether it's fundraisers from individuals, fundraisers from brands. You can do a donate button on a post. Myself, Simon, we were talking earlier about we delivered our baby during the pandemic, and as a father, I had to leave immediately just after meeting her. So just for the risk factors not to be in the hospital. So I had this moment of sitting with my daughter for just 20 minutes and then leaving her wearing a face mask. And I couldn't help but think about people around the world who won't have a Western medical system. I work closely with IRC, Doctors Without Borders. Coronavirus in camps around the world is going to be, it's hard to imagine delivering in a refugee camp at any time, let alone now. So I was able to share that moment with my friends and put on a donate button for Doctors Without Borders and raise a couple of $1,000. My friends wanted to connect, and that was very meaningful for me and my family to pass that on. More recently, we've expanded our donate tools in live, including on Instagram Live. So now you can go live on Instagram and have a donate button attached. So any user can. So if you love a nonprofit, go live and talk about them, connect, and funds will go through to that organization. One other thing that I do want to share that's really been brand new and I think is high impact for anyone who wants to have a social impact, which I'm going to imagine our audience right now is right in that bracket. We recently launched a Covert Information Hub, which is very prominently displayed, whether it's on desktop in your top toolbar or on mobile on Facebook in the bottom area. And this Coronavirus Info Hub is designed to be a place to help give people a huge amount of valuable content in this tough time. So we share health information from sources like the CDC, World Health Organization. We share locally targeted information, including requests and offers for help. And I think for any organization that works locally, this can be really powerful right now. So if you are a local food bank, I actually saw this yesterday on the Coronavirus Info Hub for me here in LA. I saw a Sikh religious organization advertising that they had food available and sharing, hey, here's our address. Anyone who comes, we have 500 meals tomorrow. So this is a way that any organization can connect to request help or to offer help or to request help. If you need volunteers, if you need support for something, you can connect on this level. We're expanding our volunteering tools on that front right now. There's also a little bit of fundraising in there too, but I'd encourage people to check it out. But I think it's a tool that people may not be fully aware of, or at least have only thought about using it as a consumer. There's real power that locally focused orgs who need to reach an audience right now, they can use that to reach people, to share opportunities to help them and connect with their cause.
And I just one follow-up question, and I remind everybody listening to pop any questions you might have for Paul into the chat box. But, you know, the issues are so serious, and the change and impact we need has to be so tangible that I want to red flag a couple of things that I think anyone out there sometimes worries about. Like you see when there's crises out there, sometimes there's fake organizations that are spun up or misinformation, or how do you vet that a nonprofit is, you know, doing the right thing? Or how do you just, at the end of all of your efforts, get some sense that it's translated to real impact? How do you close that communication loop? Now, the responsibility for that may be on the nonprofit themselves, and you see them on social media and see the great things that YesSheCan is doing and so on. Is there anything that's on these tools or platform that help you know that the precious dollars that you're committing are actually making a difference?
Yeah, very, very common request we hear from nonprofits. So on the verification front, so everything at Facebook, we try to think globally as a global platform. So our fundraising tools are live in roughly 20 markets right now. So it's everywhere from the UK and EMEA through to Australia, Canada. We recently launched in India, and there's very different local rules. In the US, it means every 501c3 org, we give access to the platform. We try to be democratic and open and have more organizations have access. As far as closing loop and connecting with donors, we offer some options right now, but we're expanding them very rapidly. So anyone who does a fundraiser, if you are a nonprofit, so we use YesSheCanCampaign as an example. Again, we're actually working to onboard Zaniya's org right now so they can fundraise on Facebook. You can then see people that run a fundraiser. So if you or I, Simon, were to do a fundraiser for YesSheCanCampaign for our birthday this year, Zaniya's org would then be able to see us on a tab on their page and come and say thank you, or thank one of our donors if they see someone had made a gift because they were inspired by the message we were sharing. Right now, we're looking for even more ways for orgs. Like a few things that we hear all the time are sophisticated orgs that have advertising budgets really want to be able to target advertising towards donors on the platform, and we're working to understand how we can expose that audience with our custom schools, something we're thinking about for future, and just more tools to help connect donors, connect supporters with causes they care about.
Right, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And just, we've got a few sort of audience questions here. One is from Gloria asking, can you explain how you put a donate now button on social media for a favorite charity? Just quickly on that one. And then
Yep.
I'll get another question from Nara and one from Frank.
Great. So on Facebook, there's a variety of options. You can click your fundraisers tab and create a fundraiser, which means that you'll create a fundraiser that can then have a goal that will run over a period of time, and you can invite your friends to donate to it. They'll also get some notifications. And for all these tools, 100% of the funds goes directly to the nonprofit you choose. So there's just a search box where you type it in, and every 501c3 in America is eligible there unless they've removed themselves, which is a very small audience. So we have that piece available. You can add a post, and in the setup of writing a post on Facebook, you can click add a donate button, and then a donate button will appear just under that post, and people can give. Again, 100% of the funds go through. There's also the ability to do it on a live video and a few others. There's depth on all of this on our website, socialgood.fb.com. So there's step-by-steps and really detailed instructions for any of this, whether it's a brand, page, or an individual. On Instagram, it's an Instagram story sticker donate option and Instagram live. So in Instagram stories, you can do a stories post, go to your little sticker tray, and there's a donate now, and you can search for a charity that comes up there and stick up a donate button. Again, 100% of the funds go through. Or if you're going live in video, you can add a charity through a similar setup process just within that menu. Again, socialgood.fb.com has incredibly detailed information about all those steps.
Fantastic. And Nara asked, does the social impact Facebook team give you a toolkit to maximize, you know, the impact that you can have? So is there any sort of little suite of tools that go with doing a fundraiser?
Yeah, we have a fair bit on the website I just mentioned. We're working to get more case studies and examples out. I just launched a case study in partnership with Doctors Without Borders, where they, last year on Giving Tuesday, they had an amazing campaign where they both run a page fundraiser that raised tens of thousands of dollars and really resonated with people and showed all the best practices for a page fundraiser. And they use Facebook advertising to get tremendous ROI, reaching targeted donors and activating them on Giving Tuesday. So there's a bunch more of those examples and best practices on the Social Good website.
And last question before we move on to Zaniya, which is, you know, Frank is saying that there's a lot of different formats and a lot of different content out there around a lot of different causes. And it's become a very noisy place. Sadly, we have so much need. It has become a very noisy place. And the question is, what do you see the future of quality of signal cutting through communication? You know, it's a little bit of a mess right now. There's so many channels, so much content. What do you see as the future of effective communication in this space?
Yeah, there's so many channels and so much content, but there's also so many people out there and people that could connect with your organization in different ways. yesterday at the Social Innovation Summit, I really enjoyed Gary Vaynerchuk, who's always brilliant, his keynote in the morning, and he was talking about the All-In Challenge, raised $53 million. And my biggest takeaway from listening to him was him saying that the most important thing he sees in social right now is having a huge amount of content that's targeted to a huge variety of audiences. So he's like, don't think about the one hero video for your cause. Think about 80 pieces of content every week, and one should be targeting Australians in Los Angeles, and one should be targeting CEOs of charities I think you're in New Jersey, Zaniya. All these different audiences need different content and different messages to connect with. But there are a suite of tools that allow you to find ways to help your audience resonate in different ways with different audiences. So I actually think it's hard because volume of content is hard, but volume of content is probably key in a noisy environment to reach the right people that will care about you.
Totally makes sense. And thank you to everyone for the questions. And as we move to Zaniya and the Yes We Can, Yes She Can campaign, I'd love to encourage you to keep putting your questions in the chat box. So Zaniya Lewis is the CEO and Executive Director of Yes She Can campaign. As a father with a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old daughter heading off, to study and so on, I deeply relate to all the amazing work that you're doing. Tell us, Zaniya, a little bit about what you're doing and, certain steps that you're taking right now to, empower young women to really realize their potential as effectively as possible.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. So the Yes She Can campaign is a 501c3 youth-led nonprofit organization, and we provide educational resources, programming, and professional development to girls, young women, and youth nationwide. And so what that means is that we facilitate workshops throughout the nation. We do virtual workshops and live workshops on topics such as college prep, women empowerment, how to write a resume, interview skills. We believe that it's really necessary that these students understand that they really need the tools and the resources to achieve their goals and dreams. And through the process of starting my nonprofit organization, before I started it, I actually had students share their stories with me about the adversity that they experienced while striving to complete their education. And many of the girls and young women and youth, they discussed how they didn't have enough funding to get their education. They also told me that they didn't have the support at home, or they didn't have support in schools. A lot of the schools really didn't teach them how to get into college, and that's something that is really sad. You would think that schools would teach students how to get into college, and they don't have those resources at schools. And so what we do is we really help these students get into college and finish, and it's important to equip them with the tools and the resources to do that. So what we're doing right now, we also have our students create projects of what they believe in. So if they want to fight for racial injustice, we give them the tools and resources to do that, and we train them. And I think it's very important that nonprofits not only help young people to go out there and change the world, but actually help them take action and do that. And so that's what we do at the Yes She Can campaign. We believe about the climb. We believe we tell our students to keep climbing, and that there will always be obstacles in the way, but the climb is what you should focus on.
And let me ask you about that, because you're doing something not only powerful in your own right, but you're empowering so many other young women to make a meaningful difference. So for anyone who's listening to this panel, what's your advice on how you most effectively build a sustainable community? Because you're reaching out to those young women and providing education and support and tools, but then they're going out there and making a difference in their own right. So is it kind of a dialogue backwards and forwards between you and them? Or do you create a community between the women and across the women so they actually support each other? Or is it both? How have you learned, what have you learned in terms of not only building, but sustaining a community for change out there?
Yes. The first important lesson that I have learned is to listen, and to listen to the stories and listen to the needs of the community. And so we don't tell the students to just go out there and do something. We say, first, listen to your community and see what they really need. And then you ask them, and then you lead them as well. And you provide those leadership opportunities for them. In my organization, we provide a community. And so we have girls, young women, and youth from across the country helping each other. And that's what it's all about. So if they need help with a resume, they can contact another girl from across the country who may be able to help them with a resume. So we are really about making sure that students have that connection in that community. And we know that in order for change to really happen, that we all must come together for that.
And, obviously there's a lot of competition for people's attention now, whether they want to donate or whether they want to kind of work with an organization to get support that they need. Like, how do you do outreach to command attention, to get people's attention? Because like the question that we had a moment ago from Frank, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of clutter out there. So how do you cut through? How do you get, the attention you rightly deserve to have the impact that you want to have?
Yeah, so one thing we do to help raise money for our organization is that we have a clothing line. And so the clothing line is actually designed by girls from across our organization, and it's with their stories. So we have like one of our products may say not average, and then someone can buy that book bag or that t-shirt, and then the money will raise money for our organization, and the proceeds will go to that. So we've tried creative ways. We also use Facebook as well to help us raise money for our organization. That's actually how we were able to get our 501c3 status, by using Facebook to fundraise and GoFundMe and all those different tools. But it's really about making sure that the students that you are serving, that they go out there and they tell their communities about the organization, because that's how they come back to us, and that's how we raise money for our organization.
It makes a lot of sense. As you said, it's about really listening and not trying to tell them what to do, but it's an extension of listening, kind of showing up in ways that are meaningful to them, as you say, with the clothing and other ways. Fantastic. And as we then look, if you have any questions for Khary, for Zaniya, we'll come back to that. I'll go on to Khary Pennybaker right now. Khary is a fellow at Everytown Survivor Network. And, this is such a controversial topic, Khary. This is such a sensitive one, and sadly, a perennial one. Year after year, we see gun violence and so on. Explain a little bit about what you do, and a little bit about what the Everytown Survivor Network is focused on.
Sure. So first, thank you for having me on today. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity. Let me first start by saying that it's unfortunate that the issue of gun violence prevention has turned into something that is deemed to be controversial. To me, it's not. Gun violence prevention is something that plagues every community. Your zip code doesn't insulate you from the deadly scourge of gun violence. Your political persuasion, your skin color does not insulate you from this. So it's incumbent upon all of us to get actively involved in stemming the tide against gun violence prevention. And what I do on the survivor side of Everytown is I engage fellow gun violence survivors like myself and help them feel as empowered and as engaged as I am, so that they are able to use their pain and their struggle, the loss of their loved one due to gun violence, and turn that into something positive, right? So you consider, for a number of years, Lucy McBath was our national spokeswoman. Her son, Jordan Davis, was shot and killed in the loud music case in Florida on Black Friday several years ago. And she went all across the country advocating and engaging folks, telling them about her story, helping them feel more empowered so that they would get involved in this movement. She then went to become a congresswoman from Georgia's 6th Congressional District. That is what the power of what advocates like myself are able to do, where we're able to utilize social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook to advocate for social change, so that more and more people are actively engaged in talking to their legislator, whether that's at the local level, the federal level, the presidential level, it doesn't matter, because this issue is something that we are not going to allow to go away, and allow more of our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers, to die needlessly at the hands of gun violence.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's any more difficult or intractable issue, it seems, here, especially in the United States. Khary, help us understand how, it seems to be so loaded with politics, and it seems to be sort of so complicated by obstacles that some of us can't even see. We feel like we're on the outside of the issue, and there's motives going on or priorities behind the scenes. How do you address those, and how do you help all of us kind of have confidence that we can get past those? Because this issue shouldn't be so persistent. It should be something that's solved for, and yet it's not. Help us understand how to mobilize around that.
So one of the things that Everytown and Moms Demand Action is very effective at is educating not only our volunteers, but the public at large. I think part of what makes some look at the issue as controversial is because they may not understand it. They may look at it from a political prism rather than looking at it from a human perspective, right? So again, gun violence does not care whether you're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't care if you live in California or whether you live in Wisconsin or Florida. It simply doesn't care, right? The bullets don't care. So it's our job to help advocates who see our communities that are torn apart from this deadly epidemic and want to actually do something. So we help train them, right? And help them understand the issue at hand, but then help get them activated, right? So that they can learn how to use, whether it's Slack or Hustle or Icebreaker or Zoom, platforms like that, utilizing groups like social or Facebook to create these groups where they can create their own sense of advocacy, using Twitter's private chat groups to be able to exchange ideas and messaging. And we've been really effective in accommodating for families who are working, right? So everybody who has a job still may want to participate, but we have tools that allow them to engage the issue and learn more about it at their own pace, whether they want to advocate on the weekends or on the evenings or at lunchtime. They can still learn, they can still get active. If you are unable to go out to an event, you can still tweet about something, so put something on Facebook. You can still get involved in text banking or phone banking and things like that. But it really comes back to how we are able to educate folks, to get them to talk about something that might seem controversial, but do so in a non-controversial way. At the end of the day, this is something that is incumbent upon every single one of us to get involved with. And we have to do so without trying to be antagonistic or in a way that's going to push you back into your corner. We want to invite you into the middle and have this conversation about something that is deadly and important, because I assure you, none of you want to walk for a second in my shoes.
Right, understood. And on a side note, we're getting questions for Zaniya, and we'll come back to you first when we go to the question section, Zaniya, because I want to make sure the people who are putting questions in, they get answered. But Khary, let me ask you this. You know, as someone who's living and dealing with such a difficult issue, what are some of the lessons you've learned on the way, just in terms of how to solve for them, how to create a space for a healthy conversation? Because gun violence is probably the most top of mind issue, but many of the people listening are dealing with very different issues of different types that they're trying to, you know, solve for. And so as you stand back from your perspective, living and breathing this every day, what are those lessons you've learned about what works most effectively when it comes to really tough issues, so that we can apply it to all of our efforts in different ways?
Right. So in the beginning, when I first got involved, it was raw pain and passion, right? I was always amped up to the nth degree. I didn't know how to talk about the issue at all. And there's so many gun violence survivors, especially that I come across, who are just enveloped in pain, and they don't necessarily know how to express that pain. I mean, you can see it physically by the way they emote, they cry and they scream and things like that, but they may not be able to effectively tell their story. Neither could I. I had to learn how to tell my story, because at the end of the day, this pain is mine, right? But I also want to help others learn how to tell their story, so that you can put faces with stories and not just look at this issue as an abstract, just looking at statistics, because those numbers don't bleed like our family members do. We have to be able to put a face with the story and help people understand the humanity that is involved in this, rather than simply talking about an issue. So that was the main thing that I think is most impactful by this. So for example, this coming Friday is Gun Violence Awareness Day. We simply call it Wear Orange Day. You can go to wearorange.com and wearorange.org and find out more about it. But in seeing how this issue is ravaging our communities, it is going to be our stories that are going to help change the way that people look at it, not just from the broader community, but the way our legislators look at it. Because sometimes they only want to look at this from a political perspective, while ignoring what this means to people like myself, who have had a family member die from gun violence. And when you sit in front of a legislator and you are simply human and you tell an effective story, I assure you, more times than not, you're going to be more effective in getting them to at least see you and hear you, more than you will be spouting just numbers and yelling at them. If you can get them to see who you are and see your pain, you can make a huge difference.
Thank you, Khary. That's so powerful. And please do enter any questions for Khary right now, and then we'll be coming back to Zaniya. And Khary, I have a question for you, which is, you know, it's a therapeutic justice problem, not a political problem, around whether they have or don't have a gun. The decision is not the decision to not need a gun to be part of society, but that's a long-term approach, and people want immediate solutions. So the question is, can storytelling open eyes and change minds and attitudes, or are we really fooling ourselves? It's a question from Frank.
Absolutely. So our organization does not, by no stretch of the imagination, are we anti-gun. We are just anti-gun violence. We have members who are Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, gun owners, non-gun owners, survivors of gun violence, and non-survivors, just allies. So it expands the whole gamut of the kind of supporters and volunteers that we have. And if you look at the way the trends have been going, so for a very long time, the gun lobby has been able to dominate in this space for years because for the most part, they've been unchecked. But now they have a counterweight in what Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action is bringing to the table, where we are helping to elect more and more candidates who not only are talking about the issue, not using gun violence as a checkbox issue, but they're running on the issue because they know that more and more voters are cognizant of this and are voting on that issue. This is my number one thing, right? This is what I vote on. If that's the prism by which I see the world. And there are more and more people like me who are simply unafraid to talk about this, but more afraid of more people dying.
Absolutely. And if you are interested and you'd like to support and you want to understand more, wearrange.org is where people can go, right?
Wearorange.org.
Oh, Wearorange.
Oh, I spelled it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It was spelled incorrect. So wearorange.org. So wearorange as in the color.org. We're chatting away in the chat box here. So wear as in your clothing, wearorange.org. And that's great. And from Frank, amazing answer, Khary. So thank you. And before we come back to Zaniya, let's speak to Laurie. And Laurie Keith is the Vice President of Media, both social and emerging at the Ad Council. Laurie, thank you. You play such an ongoing, timeless role addressing so many issues. And we see, not only the national TV spots, but the different programs that you put out there and so on. Please explain a little bit about yourself and your role there and what the Ad Council does in this space.
Yes, thank you so much. And I've just been so inspired hearing everyone speak, and I'm glad to be here. I'm the Vice President of Social and Emerging at the Ad Council, as Simon just indicated. And for those of you that don't know the Ad Council, we are a national nonprofit. We've created some of the most iconic campaigns in advertising history, from Smokey Bear to Love Has No Labels to Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk. And our mission has always been to use the power of communications and media to, drive lasting change in America and really raise awareness on the most critical issues impacting Americans. And obviously at a time like now, when there's so much fear and confusion and just the need for critical information to get to Americans, our mission could never be more timely. We actually are leading the nation's efforts for slowing the spread of coronavirus. And it has been, quite a crazy couple of months. Paul alluded to the importance of having a ton of content and having various audiences. As you can imagine, there's just so many different messaging strategies that we need to slow the spread of coronavirus, from reaching the high-risk population to targeting parents and families on how to talk to their kids, personal hygiene, thanking the essential workers. To date, the Ad Council, in the last 3 months, we have put out 255 pieces of content. We've secured $250 million in donated media, which is over almost 15 billion impressions. And so, I think when you look at our scale, we're able to really convene partners across the industry, from media companies. NBC Universal came to the table, Viacom came to the table, Sesame Street, just to name a few. And then, of course, we have the entire media industry that we have been partnering with. Like I said, we've been around since 1942, so we have that history of really, getting on the ground and really getting messages out there during critical times of crisis, from World War II when we started to September 11th to now. So really, I think of Ad Council as really being wired for this. And so it's been really incredible to see the convening of partners at this time come together. My specific role, I oversee our partnerships with social and emerging media companies. So that's Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Twitch, Pinterest. A lot of these companies you've probably heard of. I oversee our West Coast office. I moved here in 2015 to really be on the ground here where all of this technology is happening. And it has just been incredible during this time to see not only those companies I just named really come to the table with donated media, creative content, developing custom platform specific creative content in order to get the message out there. But also just, the TV networks, the print, the newspaper. I mean, literally every media company you can imagine has come to the table. And it's shifting. Every week is different. I mean, obviously we are now dealing with much more than a health crisis. And so it's a really, this pandemic and what's happening in our country is really on interrelated fronts. And so we are taking we're meeting internally right now with both internal and external partners to figure out, how we want to address this. We have decided we're shifting all pandemic, strategies to, what is impacting the most vulnerable communities and the low-income communities, because they obviously have been hit the hardest. We are in the process of actually developing a large African-American targeted effort, working with our partners at Complex and Wildcard. And now we are, taking a really deep look at, the racial disparities in our country and, how we as the Ad Council can come together in this time. We have nothing to announce yet, but, I think that in due course, we will be having some new campaigns and, just doing what Ad Council does, getting the message out there to all Americans.
And I've got two questions which are related. We all find ourselves living both in real life, IRL, and equally online across all of these different platforms, these avatars of ourselves. And, it's hard to know which drives which these days. And so two questions. You've dealt with so many different issues. Do you find it's more effective, and maybe there's no rule of thumb, but do you find it more effective to start in the real world and then build online, or to start online and then sort of point back to the real world? And secondly, obviously, all of these platforms are open to anyone to use as they choose to a large degree. And there's a big issue around misinformation and people polarizing issues through misinformation. So where do you think people should start, in the real world or online? And then how do you manage the information around an issue responsibly so that you actually effectively address the issue?
Yeah, so we have a very, we have a process for how we bring a campaign to market, and it really starts with the cause first. So identifying who the issue experts are and what that issue is deeply rooted in, how a public service campaign and advertising campaign can actually drive change and get people to take action. Every Ad Council campaign is rooted in individual action. So how can an individual do something to, either improve their lives, change a behavior, start a behavior? So it really starts with first identifying the cause, then it's research. So digging deep into the research. Why is this an issue? What is all the insights around this issue? Why are people, why is gun violence up in our country? Why are autism rates up? Why is hunger, continuing to be an issue? So we really dig deep with our issue experts, which are, national nonprofits and government agencies is who we work with. And then we move into creative content. So once we know, okay, here's exactly the message that we need to give to all Americans or, this specific audience about this message. Now we need to build create a piece of creative and content. And it's not just one anthem video. It's, print, it's TV, it's, Instagram, it's Twitter, really understanding who the audience is and where we need to reach them. And that piece of content we want to be compelling, whether it's a story of a real person that was impacted, whether it's, stats that are really going to be compelling. And it's the whole point of that piece of creative, when that person sees it, is for them to take action. And so then we pull all of those levers, of course, working with our incredible partners at Facebook and Twitter and, Pinterest. There's so many ways on a digital front to set an objective on a campaign and get someone to actually take an action, whether that's going to a website to download a form or, learning the science of autism. We place pixels on websites to really understand where they are, how they are exploring our site. And then, all of that together, of course, is oh, I forgot to mention media. At the end of it is media, is just getting the message out there. We secure, billions and billions of dollars every year. I just mentioned just in 3 months, we secured 245 million. So it's really the efforts of all of our media partners that come to the table and say, we want to support this message. This is really important. We're going to put this out, in donated media on our platform. And I think it's those four things which then drive impact. So we get, and we see it. I didn't mention this earlier, but in the 3 months that we've had our coronavirus workout, 62% of Americans have seen this message. which is on social distancing and wearing face coverings and things like that. So we see, that recipe actually results in people taking action. And it's really important to do that research up front and understand what is actually going to drive action. So then when you do put the creative out there and the media donates the media, we get to see people the issue actually start to change. So I answered your question. But.
No, that does, it does. And please fire away with any questions that you have with Laurie. And as a head up to our panelists, we want to make sure that everyone listening today walks around with tangible action steps that they can apply to their efforts. So before we finish up, I'm going to come back to each of you and ask, give us 1 or 2 key action steps that we can take to really move the needle on issues that we care about most. But I've got a couple of questions for Laurie here. One is, we'd love to see more this is from Gloria. We'd love to see the Ad Council address face masks and that issue more, because, there's so much evidence-based reason to do that. How do you address an issue that has become polarized like that, but is really in the interest of public safety to increase awareness? Like, what do you do to course correct or ramp up an issue when it's obviously so critical? It's a life and death issue.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the first part of what I talked about is really identifying the issue experts. So we're working with the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC. They're getting information every single day about the pandemic and what's happening, and working with all of the nation's top experts as it relates to the spread of this virus and how to prevent it. And so we actually do have an entire campaign. We just worked with NBC Universal on new assets that cover, that address face coverings, the importance of, even though every state right now, the restrictions are lifting and they're different state by state. And so we're now working with the CDC on an entire new effort called Rolling Reentry. So we are going to have a campaign launching in July, which is, now that we can go outside, still remember to social distance, wear a face covering, all of those important messages. But, right now we do have a campaign live that talks about the importance of face coverings and social distancing and personal hygiene, washing your hands.
And yeah, there's always more that we can do, to encourage people to do the right thing by themselves and by others. And, we have Zaniya back on the line. And I know a couple of you are asking for details about how you can sort of find out more about the Yes She Can campaign. The actual contact for that is the YesSheCanCampaign.org. YesSheCanCampaign.org. I see a number of folks asking there. And so I'm going to sort of scroll through a couple of the different questions for different panelists, and then come back at the end for clear action items. But firstly, Zaniya, great to have you back with us. Connections are always, technology always likes to remind us who's in control. So,
Yes.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you well. We had a couple of questions that were focused on how do I connect my youth from my professional development programs to your youth? Or, for example, someone works with youth in an underdeveloped, low-income educational community in Albany, New York. So how do you connect up? What's the way to go about that?
Yes. So if you're interested in connecting your youth, you can go on our website. We have a couple programs open right now. So right now we have a college and career readiness course for the summer for students can take. And then if you want me to come to your organization or another person from my organization to come, you can just contact us. You can contact me at ZaniyaLewis@YesSheCanCampaign.org, and then we can plan something.
Fantastic. And I have a question for Paul, which is sort of a process question, but an important one, which is from Christy, who was talking about she's a social worker, and that when she's doing social good through Facebook, sometimes she finds she can be viewed as an activist, and you've got to deal with reports and impersonation reports. And she's working with the Red Cross and the UN's Women Group on these platforms, and sometimes that can disrupt the work. So how do you best hedge your bets, to make sure that you get the work done most effectively, because everything's so real time these days?
Yeah, and Christy, I'm sorry that you're dealing with that issue. It's a little hard to offer direct advice on a very specific issue. I do know as of late, while we've all been working remotely, a lot of our support processes have been the most slowed down because there's a lot of privacy, special technology, yada, yada, yada. So we have over the past few weeks, I've been out on leave, but I'm pretty sure we've had a slowdown on normal support processes. Christy, just connect with me on LinkedIn or send me a message and I'll try and help you through that one. And I think in general, we try to add more to our help center. We try to add more support pieces all the time. The last few weeks, I think, have been particularly, slowed down with the remote work situation.
Thanks for that, Paul. Thanks. And let's come back to Laurie. We have a question for Laurie here. What are your tips or training on how to run a successful campaign? Does the Ad Council actually put out kind of educational guidance or content around how to run a successful campaign?
Great question. And it's interesting because we just developed a new kind of arm of the Ad Council called Ad Council Edge. You can find it on our website, adcouncil.org. We realized, being a nonprofit that's been doing social impact and social good advertising since 1942, that we do sit on a lot of knowledge and just research and, how to actually, build and develop a successful campaign that actually moves the needle on an issue. So we do have a department that, basically advises nonprofits that, maybe don't want to hire the Ad Council for a full campaign. Maybe they do. They might just want like some advice and research on how do they actually reach their audience, to like full on, we are working with brands and nonprofits to actually, help them build out a new campaign. So definitely check that out. I think what I referenced earlier, I think, the main things and importance of a successful campaign is first partnering with the issue experts, like make sure that you're partnering with the nonprofit or working, if you are a nonprofit, working with people in the field that actually know everything that there is to know about the issue, so you can really get grounded in the issue and make sure that your advertising, of course, doesn't come across as tone deaf and you really, really understand the issue. Making sure that you're long-term, that you have a long-term strategy, that it's not just, one and done, that you're, coming out there with a strategy and you have a consistent, messaging throughout the year based on tentpole events for that issue. I think partnering with talent, spokespeople that are either have a personal experience with the issue or just, really, really care about that issue. We found that to be really, really important for Ad Council campaigns. We have a whole talent department. I think media audience, making sure that you're partnering with the right media partners, getting the message out there. There's a lot, but I'm happy to talk to you offline too. Feel free. I'll drop my email here in the chat, and would happy to talk to any of you.
And Laurie, just for everyone's benefit, what's that link again? What's the domain name for that information? That successful.
Our website is adcouncil.org, like organization, just adcouncil.org. We actually just launched a brand new site last week, so check it out. You can find everything from who we are, our campaigns, our assets. If you are a media company and you want to support our campaigns, you can also download our assets from there as well.
Fantastic. And I'd encourage everyone to fire away with any questions that they still have in their mind, as we're kind of getting towards the close, because this is all about you. And so do interrogate our lovely panelists about how to get the important work done. And with that in mind, I'd like to ask each of us one by one, just to really, from top of mind, talk about a strategy or a tactic or an insight or a lesson you've learned on the way that makes this most important work. Because we're at a time now where we've got to solve for so many critical issues: biodiversity, plastics in the ocean, climate crisis, which are all still there in the background while we're dealing with social justice, we're dealing with COVID-19, and all of us need to show up. We need to work with each other, for each other. And so help us, because you are such a brains trust on this panel, understand in broad strokes or hard-won lessons what we need to do, what we can take away and apply to our individual efforts. So Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot first because, it's just it's sort of an Aussie thing to do. What can you do? Like, what would you share with us as someone, ever since the charity water days and Facebook and Instagram and so on, what are some broad strokes that you would share with us about what strategies and tactics work?
Yeah, I think, and I didn't really go over this much in my intro, but over the last decade, I've been working on peer-to-peer fundraising in particular, both from the early days when I was leading digital at Charity Water through to the main focus of my role now. I think one of the things to realize is that the most powerful form of marketing, the most powerful influence in the world is the influence you have on your nearest friends and family for any issue. If you're discussing racial justice, if you're advocating for gun control, if you're explaining the importance of scholarship displacement like Zaniya is, it's that person-to-person connection. The power of peer-to-peer fundraising is that every fundraising campaign is a word-of-mouth campaign. So if I wear orange for Everytown next week, I can do that on Facebook, post an image, and post a donate piece. I can promise to match donations. I can direct funds that will help Everytown do even more of the real legislative work while advocating. But my friends, my family, the people that I have direct influence on, they'll see me wearing orange. They'll see me standing for gun control, as well as delivering that direct input. So I think the way we always thought about it at Charity Water was, how do we maximize people's ability to give, raise, and influence? And that's always landed with me, because we want people to give directly. We want people to fundraise, but we really want them to get out there and be an advocate for an issue and connect with it. So I think that's the piece of focus in tools, is with these tools that activate individuals, you can raise funds that will keep your organization alive, particularly in this time when most orgs are really struggling with overhead, whilst also advocating for the issues that matter the most.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And Khary, two things. I'd love you to do the same. You know, you're dealing with such a difficult and personal and emotional issue. And there's one other question also I'd love you to answer, which is from Nara, who asks, you know, when telling stories doesn't resonate, what's another way to impact anti-gun violence, particularly with young people? So what are some other strategies you might have?
So I think when you're considering whether or not a story may or may not be impactful, I would ask that you look at what the Students Demand Action side of our organization has done and what the Parkland students have done. They have taken something that may not have been as impactful, that some might have thought that wasn't impactful, and changed policy. They have changed the dynamic of activism for young folks. I mean, they really have engaged in a way that people didn't expect them to, whether that's turning out people to vote or just getting people more aware of the issue of gun violence prevention. I am not of the mindset where I'm willing to accept that someone's story isn't impactful. Your audience may not find it so in that current engagement, but the next one might. And it's the desire, that unrelenting desire to continue to tell that story in the series of stories over and over again, because there's going to be someone in that audience or in that office that's going to hear what you have to say and be so compelled by that they just can't not take action. They have to get engaged and do something. So I wouldn't let someone define what your level of impactfulness is going to be. You decide that, and you're not gonna win every situation, but the more you do it, the more hearts and minds you will change.
Fantastic. Thank you, Khary. Really appreciate that. Zaniya, you know, you are dealing with what is the future of change, young people, and especially young women. This is the leadership we need moving forward. What advice would you give us about, you know, effective strategies and tactics for how to mobilize a community in service of something you care about? What have you learned in your journey, you know, with YesSheCanCampaign?
Yes, so I have learned that stories are impactful, and that, you know, by sharing your story, you can really change the world. And I also believe, and I've learned that, you know, there are some great brands out there that are helping nonprofit organizations make sure that their work will spread and expand even more. And we need more brands and companies to do that, because you can't just have a video saying about a certain issue, or you just can't write a press release about it. You need to really change the culture in your companies and your brands, and that's by bringing more diversity, equity, and inclusion, and make sure that's a part of the culture. That's not just a part of the words in your company. And that means partnering with nonprofit organizations to provide job opportunities to young people, especially young people of color. I know during this virus, a lot of young people of color couldn't do their internships because a lot of companies and brands decided to eliminate them. And that's actually not helping, that's hurting, you know, these students who still are having a rough time and having hardships and obstacles in their way. And so what I believe that, you know, in order for change to really happen, we need these companies, these big brands and companies to really come together and really strategize and make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of the culture and not just words.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. And Laurie, last words in our last couple of minutes. You know, what has inspired you? What have you learned on the way? What have you found is most effective?
Yeah, and I realized I never really answered your other question about like offline, online, which made me think to bring it up now. You know, we are exploring a lot of partnerships that start online, but then, you know, drive an action offline. You know, I'll provide a couple examples. One with Instagram last year, we partnered with Cafe Grumpy, a local coffee shop in New York City. And it was for our youth suicide prevention campaign, which encourages teens to check in with their friends that they think might be struggling with mental health. And so we did this entire Instagram campaign. It was like a 2-for-1 coupon. You took a screenshot when you saw the ad in your Instagram stories feed, and then you could take it into a Cafe Grumpy and have a coffee with a friend. And then when you arrived at the coffee shop, there was like tent cards on the tables and coffee sleeves. And we saw like hundreds and hundreds of teens, you know, going in and having coffee with their friends. And talking hopefully about mental health. And then, you know, we work with partners like Snapchat. They have, you know, everyone using lenses and filters, you know, every single day. And we did a lens challenge for our bullying prevention campaign, which is all about, you know, spreading kindness and, you know, getting teens to really, you know, create an empathetic world. And so we did this week-long challenge where we had them share a story through this lens experience, a story of how someone had positively impacted their lives, which is a part of the campaign's call to action. And then, you know, we saw 2 million people use the lens and share their stories. And so we're really, you know, especially where I sit at the Ad Council, really starting to look at technology as a way to drive action. You know, it might start with a campaign and a piece of creative, but then how can we get someone to actually do something, share a story, you know, go out and have that conversation. And so I just really encourage all of you to really look at each tech platform because they're all so different. You know, what we can do with Instagram is different than what we're doing with Twitch, which, you know, we're also exploring the virtual concert space and music streaming space. So that's really, you know, what I encourage all of you to do is just look at each platform and think about how you can actually use the platform to drive action beyond just, you know, building an ad campaign.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you to all our panelists. I mean, Paul, thank you for your time and for your personal and professional commitment. Everyone, please do look at socialgood.fb.com if you want to know more information. You know, Khary, thank you so much. And everyone check out weareorange.org. Zaniya, you know, YesSheCanCampaign.org. And then Laurie, adcouncil.org for all the resources that you're providing. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for enabling us to do a better job out there. And to everyone watching and listening, thank you for your engagement and questions. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions today.